So if you've ever been a security consultant or penetration tester or just any role that's tested the security of web applications, you've probably used Burp Suite. At least I used to use it all the time when I was a security consultant. And today we're going to take a look at some super cool new AI-powered features that make it an even more powerful security tool. So, hey, my name's Clint. I'm the creator of the TLDRSec newsletter and head of security research at SemGrep. And I'm thrilled to be joined by my friends Stuttard, who's the creator of Burp Suite and founder of Portswigger, and James Kettle, the director of research at Portswigger. Hey, guys.
Hey, Glenn. Hey, everyone. Great to be here.
So before we get into it, do you both mind introducing yourselves briefly?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Daff. I'm the creator of Burp Suite a long time ago. I used to be a penetration tester myself for many years. I ended up doing a lot of web testing in the fairly early days of the web security industry. And I really wrote Burp Suite for myself originally to help me do my job better. And then eventually released a version of it, free download and a little paid version, and Portswigger was born without any more planning or foresight than that. And I also wrote a book along the way that you might know, the Web Application Hacker's Handbook, and that was me trying to capture everything that I was doing when I did web security testing back then. Portswigger is still thriving. I still lead the business. I'm very hands-on day to day. Don't get to write any code these days, but I'm very close to product and a lot of the kind of horizon scanning and strategy thinking around that.
I'm James Kettle, sometimes known as AlbinoX, and I lead the research team here at Portswigger, where we focus on finding innovative ways to make creative tools and also new ways to break websites and the internet or anything that speaks HTTP in general.
Yeah, if you've been following web security at all for the past 10 years, you've probably seen one or more of James's Black Hat or DEF CON talks where he breaks most of the internet through sort of attacking web caching behavior, timing attacks, or other awesome stuff. So definitely check out the Portswigger blog if you haven't already. Okay, so just diving right into it, Daff, I'm curious how Portswigger thinks about AI and sort of why AI and also why now?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think overall we're very excited about the potential for AI to be quite transformative in the web security industry. I think like everyone else, we were following the arrival of ChatGPT and developments in what the latest models were capable of, and really starting to think in a really big picture way, what are the potential applications of this for our space? I think we could see when we started to play and tinker with things quite how powerful it was and what was going to be possible. I think we were also quite mindful of how security people, hackers in particular, are maybe disproportionately skeptical about gimmicks and also very mindful of data privacy and protection. So we thought long and hard about how AI could best fit into people's testing workflow in a way that was going to be comfortable for them. So that, it could have been easy to think of what are some gimmicky, quick features to add that give us some AI sparkle and some publicity, but we really didn't want to go down that route. We really wanted to think about where the value was, where this technology could be really empowering to security testers to make them more productive, more efficient, and more scalable. We also didn't want to kind of just create some kind of AI-powered black box that ran, independently of your existing workflow. So you could be working in your normal way and, proxy and repeat for an intruder, or flip and turn on this kind of weird engine that would try to replicate you. Our vision was very much more to weave the AI-powered capabilities into the tooling, into the features, into the workflows that the human tester is already using. And so it would appear in lots and lots of different places, just at the margin of different features, little power tools, and so on, as opposed to being some kind of fully autonomous, pen testing engine. We spent a fair bit of time playing with what was possible and identifying where the value is, and gave an awful lot of thought to the kind of the protection side, the privacy side, what people will be worried about when they thought about AI. And we're very excited now to be able to be revealing our first major feature set with the world.
Nice. Yeah, I like how you framed it in the blog post, which we can also link in the description, about, just being hey, we're not just blindly adding AI into everything. We're thinking thoughtfully about how it augments people's real workflows, and we can talk in a second how you figured out which things to do. But just the things that we already have a great tool, we can keep improving that. We're not going to be a vendor that just AIifies everything. We're going to be thoughtful about where it actually adds value.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, the blog post came off to me as a very measured and thoughtful and non-hypey. So I appreciated that.
That's it. the most valuable things in Burp Suite are the users using it. And we've always known that. And we've always tried not to replace the user, but to multiply how productive they can be through the tool. And that's the approach that we're trying to take here.
Yeah, I think if I go back to the very early days, that some of the first tooling I wrote in Burp, when I was a pen tester, it was all about offloading some of the manual, repetitive, monotonous, less reliable work to automation. So actually the very first Burp feature I wrote is now Burp Intruder, as a way of like quickly and easily configuring automated custom attacks to do things that previously you either had to do literally manually by intercepting individual requests and manipulating them over and again, or writing a custom script each time to do each attack. And I think we really saw AI as another version of that possibility. This is another generation of technology which has that same power to be able to take things that for a long time, even with the likes of Burp Intruder in the world, have still had to be done by the human, but can be a bit monotonous and repetitive and less exciting. And it's another big chunk of that work which can be offloaded to the machine, which frees the human to bring their ingenuity, their intuition, their problem solving, their more imaginative approach to the places where it's really valuable.
Yeah, that makes sense. Could you talk briefly about privacy? Because I know passing information to various model providers might make some people concerned, or at least like they want to be aware. So yeah, it sounds like you've spent a lot of thought about that. So I'm curious to know more.
Yes, definitely. I mean, this is something we didn't just want to land without giving real serious thought to that. There's probably a few things to kind of call out that went into our approach. One is that there won't be any unintended exposure of data. So the user is fully in control. Anytime, if you use an AI feature, then you are consciously sending some data and some information to the AI to be processed, but that isn't going to happen unless you trigger those features. Secondly, there's a global opt-out. So there's a global kill switch. If you personally, or if your organization's policy says, you just must not send any data to AI, then that's just something you can turn off, and you just carry on using Burp in exactly the same way. Everything will still work exactly the way it used to. Another thing is that we can guarantee that when data is shared with external vendor models, it won't be used by them for any training. So there is no risk that your data is going to be ingested into a training set and then somehow regurgitated in future, or it's not going to be lying around in an insecure S3 bucket anywhere. And we also really wanted this not to be kind of a black box feature that is not intelligible how it's working to the user. So we've really gone in for transparency on as far as possible in the way the AI is using, and the outputs will share the context of how they're working, so people can get some comfort as to how their data is being processed. So I think we're very understanding of people's reticence about this. I think we've done everything that's feasible to give people that assurance and allow them to be kind of compliant with whatever obligations they might have.
We have a dedicated page with more info focused on this specific topic, which is worth checking out if you're interested in that too.
I suppose that the other aspect of it, the reason why now for AI is largely because of the sheer power, the sheer value that it can unlock. And we would expect there'll be an adoption curve of different, people with different instincts, different postures on data privacy, different, regulatory environments to kind of walk that curve at the pace that suits them. What we hope and what we expect is that when the value is demonstrated, that is what helps people to overcome that reticence. And when it becomes clear that there's more value and there's less risk to actually embrace this technology, make use of it, compared with not using it and leaving it only in the hands of your adversaries, then we think this will be the shift that gets people over any hurdles there.
That makes sense. And it's maybe not too dissimilar from the move to cloud, where initially people were like, it's risky. It's someone else's computer. I don't control it if it's not my data center. But then eventually sort of the just velocity, cost savings, and other benefits were clear that people were like, well, maybe the value is too much for us to avoid this. So it sounded like I heard you make sort of a similar argument. Obviously, they're different, but kind of thematically similar in terms of providing value.
Yes, absolutely. And I think these days it's really commonplace for all kinds of enterprises to make heavy use of cloud-based applications, as long as that's done appropriately. It's something they've overcome. What's interesting this time around, I think the move to cloud was in the early days was triggered by disruptors, and many of the incumbents were kind of holding out and resisting it for a while. It's interesting this time that the charge is very much being led by big tech. So the AI is already everywhere in applications people are already using in the cloud.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. So you hinted at this a bit before, but I'm curious to know more about how Portswigger decided where AI can add value in people's workflows.
Yeah, sure. We maybe just give a bit of our backstory, like everyone else, through around 2003 time, as ChatGPT came into focus, we were playing with stuff and getting quite excited about the possibilities. Around that time in 2023, internally at Portswigger, we put together a small innovation squad of some of our software engineers who are kind of most interested in doing some of the research type work, and really set them thinking about the art of the possible and set their briefs to be extremely wide initially. We didn't want to preempt exactly how the features might appear or work. We really wanted to go as wide as possible and ask what kind of things were going to be available in future. We tested numerous ideas, all kinds of different things, lots that didn't lead anywhere, some huge aha moments when we realized what was going to be possible. And that allowed us to identify a whole bunch of places in Burp's existing capabilities, feature set, in people's existing workflows where the AI was going to be most valuable and also most incremental and easiest to begin starting to use. We took a look at building our own models, training our own models, or whether we could lean on the foundation models. I think what we actually found is with the pace of innovation and progress in the foundational models, it was the best path was to lean heavily into those, because by the time we'd trained our own, most likely those technologies would have moved on so far. We don't actually have a vast data set to be able to do our own training on. I think we've always taken user data privacy extremely seriously, and we get some lightweight feature usage telemetry from users if they opt into it, but we don't get anything around the actual data they're crunching, the vulnerabilities they're seeing, or the kinds of applications they're testing. So we don't have a vast crowdsourced data set that we could just throw a model at and train our own. Our approach was largely around figuring out the right prompting and then the right kind of agent architecture to implement some of the more advanced capabilities. We also spent quite a lot of investment in building a robust testing platform and framework so that we could, as models evolve and as different vendors produce different versions, we can fairly efficiently test which ones are working best for all our different range of use cases that we have tests for.
Absolutely. It's a lot like how we approach research too, in that you basically say, well, anything is on the table. We will try out a large volume of different ideas and we'll just see what happens. And if the idea looks promising, we'll keep iterating on it until we've got something that we can deliver real value with. And if it doesn't look promising, then we'll just bail with it as early as possible and not want to waste any more time going down that pathway.
Yeah. And then probably towards the second half of last year, 2024, we were pretty optimistic about the initial feature set that was taking shape. And so we actually arranged a private trial with a few dozen of our users and gave them early access to some of these big features when they were still in beta to get feedback on how they're finding it. And that was really helpful to reassure us of the high value that was there, and also enable us to hear any concerns they had about data and privacy and to refine some of those features a bit further.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. James, I was wondering if you could weigh in a little bit on, well, I guess we're going to get into demos in a second, but I'm curious if you had any thoughts on what you chose not to explore, or some things that maybe initially seemed promising, but then ended up not being.
What we found to be the most effective is the force multiplier stuff, where you can kind of lean on what the user is doing and lean on the user's expertise and then take advantage of that to deliver something that's even better and help them be even more productive than they otherwise would have been. One good example of something that we tried that we just backed off from quite quickly because it did not look promising is autocomplete. Because you've got code autocomplete everywhere, it's a really obvious thing to try to put into, say, Burp Repeater. But what we found was that, at least with the current state of the models, they really struggle to autocomplete in a way that delivers a large amount of value. Like, yeah, it's nice to have, but they can't really predict exactly what you're going to do with the level of precision that's required with autocomplete. Whereas, as we'll see soon, there's some other things that are conceptually kind of similar to autocomplete that actually work really, really well.
Cool. Yeah, let's get into the demos. So we're going to show a couple of things. So one, a feature called Explore Issue, and then Shadow Repeater. And then I think we'll also talk about some new API extensions that make it easy to build your own AI-powered features. So yeah, let's leap into Explore Issue. Is there anything you want to say briefly about it before just showing the demo?
No, I think we're good to go. This is a core Burp Suite feature. You can try this out for yourself on the website that we're actually going to use to demo it in the video.
On this website, as we can see, Burp Suite has found a SQL injection vulnerability. And normally we would take something like this and we would manually investigate it to see how exploitable it is and what kind of risk it poses to the business. But this time, instead, we're simply going to hit this Explore Issue button and let the AI do the work for us. Now, at this point, if you wanted to, you could just walk off and make a cup of tea or do some more manual testing elsewhere on this site and come back to it. But for the purpose of this demo, we're going to look at exactly what the AI is doing. And it's going to inform us of every step it takes. So you can see here, it's gone, okay, this looks like union-based SQL injection. So I think I need to work out how many columns this site is using in order to build a successful exploit. And you can see then it's now sending a series of payloads to work out how many columns there are. And eventually it figures out the correct number of columns and then starts looking at what data type it should use in each input in order to be able to easily extract data from other tables. And one of the cool things here is even if this isn't working, even if it's trying the wrong thing, you can just interact with these requests and these responses and still learn from what's happening here. But in this particular case, everything is going completely smoothly. You can see it's now just using casting, and it's identified a specific column where it can input string data. So now it's decided to hunt down the table names, and then it's looked at the table names and decided that the users table sounds interesting. And then finally, it sent a payload designed to extract a username and password in a single query. And finally, it's finished and generated this summary at the top here, telling us the absolutely essential information that we need to know. So if you came back to this after looking elsewhere, you could just read that top line and be like, wonderful, this has got a username and password, and I know exactly how much of a threat this SQL injection poses.
Yeah, so this is super, super cool. I like it a lot. One thing I just wanted to quickly ask about, so it seems like for each step here, it's sort of showing you both the thought process of the model as well as the request and response. So you could like take any of those requests and maybe pass it straight to Repeater to keep testing that?
Yeah, that's right. We wanted the user to get value from it, regardless of whether it successfully did some crazy exploit chain or whether it got blocked by something. We want the user to be able to step in wherever they like and kind of pick it up from wherever it left off.
Nice. Yeah. And I like how, so either your manual testing or Burp sort of continuous scanning tests are flagging different issues. And then this is basically just autonomously testing to see, is this a real issue? And then what is sort of the impact of it? Kind of like you have some mini helping hands going and like doing the initial scouting for you. I like this feature a lot, and I would have loved to have it when I was a security consultant. And so super exciting to see. I'm curious in terms of when you're structuring how the AI part works, like there's a couple of different ways you could do it. So one way is sort of deterministically in code, having some sort of like finite state autonomo where you're like, okay, when we see something that's potentially SQL injection, first do this, then do this, then do this. And sort of the logic is like programmatic and deterministic code. And then maybe each individual step is like an LLM call, but the overall structure is predefined. A second way you could do it is maybe having the leaning on the model itself to determine what are those steps and executing each steps. And I'm curious which of those two, or maybe a hybrid, you leaned into for either this or other features, and why?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's almost, I had a similar sort of reaction the first time I saw the earliest version of this. I was like, is this some kind of magic trick where it's just been pre-programmed with all of this stuff in advance? And the answer is no. There's basically no built-in knowledge of this vulnerability type or anything like that. What Burp Suite's doing is it's briefing it as a security consultant, and it's giving it the hooks into into the Burp tool so that it can speak Burp's language, and it's getting it to approach the vulnerability exploration in the way that we found gives us the best results. But you can run this on any scan issue and it will completely dynamically work out what to do. And the really cool thing with that is how versatile it makes it, because maybe it runs into some really obscure WAF filter or quirk of the application that's like splitting on commas or something like that would completely destroy a tool like SQL Map. But the AI will just be like, oh, this is weird. I wonder what's happening. Oh, it's splitting on commas. Well, I'll work around it by doing this instead. And it's doing all of that without us having to kind of predict every possible challenge that it might run into and have to overcome. And that's what makes this so powerful.
Yeah, because it's kind of limited if for every type of scan issue, every type of potential edge case, like if you had to somehow code that in, well, yeah, there's going to be unknowns, weird application behavior, WAF behavior, things like that. So this is a neat sort of generic approach, really.
Yeah, I think if the applications of AI were quite narrowly defined and you ideally wanted it to follow a linear sequence that we could design in advance, compute-wise, it'd probably be more efficient to hard code more of it and just bring in the AI for specific steps where we knew classic code couldn't handle. I think the realization is it's that, as James said, it's that improvisation and that chaining of things together, and that's just an explosion of possibilities that might play out, and that's what these models with today's tech are really good at. So there's a bit of a mindset shift from starting by thinking, well, let's code it the classical way unless we're forced not to actually thinking, let's lean on the AI to do as much of the reasoning as possible and only intervene with hand-cranked code when we know there's a limitation of where the AI can take us. And I think that's the thing that's going to be explosive in terms of the value over the long term, because when there are new vulnerability classes that appear, the reasoning models will figure out how to chain things together, maybe even in a way that our researchers haven't foreseen. So we couldn't have pre-coded it even if we'd had the time to do so.
Yeah, that is an interesting shift. That's a good point. You mentioned reasoning models. I was curious if you, in general, for these various AI enhanced features, how much you leaned on, say, GPT-4o or Claude Sonnet 3.5 versus like an o1, o3, or I guess Claude 3.7, sort of like the reasoning models. I'm curious if you sort of use a combination of reasoning models and sort of just generic powerful LLMs, or I don't know. Just curious about your experiments there.
I don't believe we've pulled in the changes in the latest, the most recently available reasoning models yet. What we've got has been, it was built before those existed and has been extensively tested and works well like that, and they're cheap. Obviously, we are definitely going to be looking at those and whether they can make this stuff even more powerful. One of the themes that we've seen with this research is that as AI models get better, our features get vastly better without us even having to change anything, which is absolutely insane. So for example, with Shadow Repeater, which we're going to demo shortly, we actually tried to build something basically identical about 18 months ago. And when we tried it then, it didn't work. It just didn't have the quality to provide real value to the user. And then we picked up the same concept pretty much identically really recently and found that thanks to model advancements, that same concept with us doing no extra work now basically worked out of the box and was super powerful and immediately obviously valuable.
Nice. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. That's such an awesome story and kind of crazy to imagine that, you're like, hey, I tried to do this thing. It didn't work. I just waited a year and like, bam, the previous approach like basically works immediately. So let's get into Shadow Repeater. So here's a quick demo.
Here you can see we're doing some manual testing in the repeater, trying to cause an error message to get evidence of whether the site is vulnerable to server-side template injection, but we're not getting the payload syntax quite right. However, behind the scenes, Shadow Repeater is watching what's happening and it's trying its own variations of our payloads for us. And if you look at this one here, the organizer has flashed it, sent it over because it's noticed its variation has been successful.
So what's happening behind the scenes is this local piece of code. It's identified where in the repeater you're placing payloads, and then it's collecting just those payloads. And once it's got a certain sample size, those payloads get sent off to an LLM, which is then asked to generate variations of those payloads. And then it will automatically send all those variations from your Burp Suite, and it will get the responses and use some non-AI based analysis to identify if any of the responses were significantly different from what the user was seeing in their manual testing. And then finally, if it sees something that is significantly different, it flags it for you by sending it to the organizer so that you can look at it. In effect, behind the scenes, the whole time you're doing manual testing in Repeater, it's automatically trying variations of what you're doing, and it's following your lead. And it's kind of like a little bit like having something automatically generating and running mini intruder attacks for you continuously behind the scenes and just letting you know if it finds anything. The really cool thing here for me, like what's most exciting about this tool concept, is that it doesn't interrupt your workflow at all. You don't have to do anything whatsoever. You just turn the extension on and you just test something as you normally would. And then whenever you feel like it, you can go over to the organizer and see what it's found. So it isn't kind of trying to force you to change your workflow. It's just helping you out behind the scenes.
Yeah, that was a big thing that stuck out to me as well, which I think is super cool because you're just doing your testing as normal. It's not interrupting you. It's not bothering you. And then, periodically you can go check and it just, doesn't bother you if it didn't find anything. But if it did find a meaningful difference, then you just get some sort of free value with putting in no additional time or effort or thought.
That's it. Yeah. And the other thing that's super exciting about this is how long it took us to make that. That took around 2 days to create. It literally took us longer. It took us 3 days to make the video because on the research team, we're not used to making videos to promote features. Like that's how fast you can build something that gives real value with AI by adding an API into Burp Suite's Montoya API. You can now really easily build your own proof of concept extensions like this really quickly using our infrastructure.
Nice. Yeah, that is super exciting. And let's talk about that in more detail in a second. But I just wanted to quickly mention another thing I like about this is it's almost like having a senior colleague or friend who, let's say you're like, well, I know, some reasonable XSS payloads or server-side template injection. Like I kind of know how that works. So I'm going to try 2 or 3 things, but maybe this is a slightly different framework, or maybe the encoding is slightly different. And like I could imagine all these cases of like near misses where like you almost found a thing but didn't quite, and then just having like sort of an automatic exploration of the state space of potential things you could send. I could just see that catching a lot of things that like you almost found but like weren't actually going to find, but you didn't know it was there. But this might actually find it. So I think that's super cool.
That's it. I always find myself wondering like how many vulnerabilities did I just miss because I just like typoed something, or I used a single quote when I should have used a double quote, or so on. And this tool will just find that for you and let you know.
Yeah, unfortunately, you can't sort of go back in time and be like all the thousands of dollars in bug bounty or whatever you would have made.
Not yet, no.
Although I suspect, I have no inside information, but I suspect that with some of these features, and one thing I think that's really cool about the various Portswigger research blogs is it's like, hey, we thought of this new technique, we proved it on a few things, and then we scanned everything on the internet and found a gazillion things. So I think with these features, it seems very reasonable to me that I would expect some blog posts in the near future that are similar to those previous large-scale explorations.
Yeah, we'll definitely see what happens there. What we want to do with this API is basically get everyone else in on the fun too, really. We've got a lot of users. There's a lot of experts using Burp and they have all these great ideas. And it's always been like, oh, I've got this cool tool idea, but I don't want to spend 2 weeks making this tool. But now a bunch of those things, you can make them in 1 or 2 days instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is, I think, a huge, meaningful difference. So let's get into, you mentioned a little bit the Montoya API and how Shadow Repeater was actually built in like 2 days. So could you just tell me a little bit more about the API and what people can be excited about?
Absolutely. So Burp Suite's always had an extender API where you can build extensions for it that improve its capabilities. And what we've just done is we've added a new feature within it where you can really easily make your extension invoke large language models through our infrastructure. And what that means is when you make use of that, it's going to work in everyone's Burp everywhere. You don't need to worry about like what model it is. There's no configuration required from their side and so on. And also because because it's using our infrastructure. You know, it's not going to be used for training any models anywhere, and so on. So it's just about lowering the barrier to experiment, because at the end of the day, all of this stuff is research. It needs people to experiment and explore and try things out. And we just want to make that as easy for users as possible.
Yeah, well, what we didn't want is people, end users are afraid to go and install a bunch of extensions in future because they've got this paranoia that they're all going to be sending data to different AI services, all over the world, and they would lose that governance and controls. So all of the same protections that we've talked about for the native features are then just automatically baked in to extensions, so people can install them with confidence just as they can for the native features. And it takes a bunch of work, as James said, off the extension author. They can just go straight for writing some cool feature. They don't need to worry about how they're going to access the relevant model and how the user's going to pay for it and all of that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And also, as a user, I might not want to, if I install an extension and maybe I don't necessarily know the author and it's asking for various AI API keys, and I'm like, well, do I want to do like a manual source code audit of like every single extension I use to make sure that they're not like going to be stealing all of my credits in the future? Or I guess they could always change the behavior in the future if they get access to the, for example, OpenAI API token, but you've just sort of taken that off the table entirely, where users just don't even need to worry about that.
Yeah, exactly. So with every extension, you have to use a manual switch to turn on that extension's AI capability, so that there is zero risk when you install any extension from the App Store that's going to suddenly start doing AI stuff behind the scenes.
Definitely. And you are not entrusting any of them with an API key as well. Nice. I like it. Well, I would love to hear any exciting previews you can share about future work or things you're hacking on, things we might be seeing in the next couple of months or year or so.
Absolutely. One of the things where we've seen some potential and we're quite excited to explore is using AI to enhance Burp Scanner's crawling capabilities. I think it's quite well known that crawling a website automatically is quite a challenging task. Yeah, there's many challenges there. And basically, our current crawler will crawl a website and it will do a pretty good job, but depending on the website, it might take quite a long time to discover all the key pieces of attack surface. Whereas if you look at what a pen tester does, they basically have a sense for, if I go over here, I'll probably find a file upload feature and I'll use that to get a shell and then dump out the source code, and then my life's really easy, right? So it's saying, can we get that kind of human prioritization and intuition and targeting into the crawler to make something that gets you really good results really fast, even on large complex websites where actually loading every single page on the site would take hours and hours. That's one of the things that we're super excited to work towards. Also on the research side, one thing we've seen is that Turbo Intruder is a really popular tool, and you can solve kind of most simple use cases with the built-in scripts. But if you want to do a more complex attack, like a multi-step race condition or something like that, you need to be fairly good at coding Python. And one thing we're exploring is whether we can basically remove that requirement by saying, actually, you can just describe the attack in English instead. Well, or your language of choice, to be fair, just in natural language, and then we'll generate that script for you. That's something that we've had a quick look at, and it looks like has potential. So we're excited to explore that further. And it's a good example of one of those things where it's like, well, even people that are worried about data leaving their system, they're probably not that worried about a prompt that they wrote leaving their system that says, write an attack that sends request A and then sends request B, because that's not particularly sensitive. Like, it doesn't need the actual requests. They stay inside Burp Suite. So it's one of those ones where potentially there might be more appetite for that kind of thing. We're interested to find out.
Yeah, and
nice.
that concept James just outlined, we can also apply it to BAMDAs. So BAMDAs are little self-contained scriptlets that you can type into a little mini IDE inside the Burp interface in all kinds of places to customize and automate some features on the fly. There's definitely a way that we can use the LLM to, from natural language, write the BAMDA code for us. And then you have this huge power to be able to chain different operations together. So we get this complementary complementary opportunity between more Lambdas going into features across Burp and the reasoning, the AI's reasoning, being able to just say in natural language what it wants to achieve. And that can be implemented on the fly by injecting these little bits of script across Burp. We talked earlier about how Intruder was a game changer for offloading repetitive work. We get to the point where a human can just describe what they're trying to do, and a big chunk of it will be done. But the human critically is still providing the intent and the steer on what needs to happen. There's probably some great opportunities thematically around understanding the meaning and the purpose of an application that's being tested. So during the recon phase, when you're trying to understand attack surface, the model will be able to see right through the syntax and be able to tell you what types of vulnerability are likely to emerge in different places. And then when we report vulnerabilities, it will be able to give a steer on the likely business impact. So this is something that the automated tools have always suffered from, that, they just need to say, well, it's an XSS, so map it to a certain vulnerability, severity level, where if the AI knows we're testing a brochureware site that's on its own domain, a little self-contained XSS there is one thing, but if that's on a bank, it's totally different. And very often the foundation model itself, for many public websites and domain names, it will already know the security posture of that organization, as well as what it can glean from reading, the name of the function that's affected. So that is really powerful in terms of, you can take the results of an automated scanner and make it much more relevant and actionable for an organization.
Nice. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think what you were talking about before as well with the code generation is super exciting, because Burp is already so incredibly flexible and customizable for you're on a project and you're like, well, I kind of needed to do this thing. It's already great at doing that. So I imagine just the number of cases where you're like, well, this would be useful for this project, but I only have 5 or 10 days, and like doing this thing might take me like 2 or 3 days, but now it takes like an hour, which just kind of changes the game in terms of what you can feasibly accomplish in a short amount of time. Well, nice. This is super exciting. Explorer issue and Shadow Repeater already super exciting to play with. So yeah.
On the topic of code generation for Lambdas, if you find yourself looking at what you can currently do with Lambdas and being like, well, that's kind of cool, but it's not that exciting, I would just say wait a month or two and then see.
Nice. Oh man. Yeah, I guess you can't see because it was off screen, but I was like rubbing my hands together with excitement. Well, yeah, thank you both so much for your time. It was a pleasure chatting with you, and some super cool demos that are already live and things you can use today, as well as some things coming soon. So yeah, any final closing thoughts or where you'd like people to check out next?
I think I'd really encourage people who've heard this and think it sounds interesting to go and try it yourself. So if you just update the latest version of Burp Suite Pro, we're giving everyone a bunch of free AI credits to get started and play with the feature. So we'd love to hear as well from you about what you've been able to do and your experience of using the features.
My call to action would be build some extensions, have some fun with it, and don't forget to join the Burp Suite Discord channel and let us know how it's going.
Cool. I'm sure people will. All right. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.